Thank you very much, and good morning and good afternoon to all of you. Let me present to you the human heart. Look at it. Look at the rhythm, look at the coordination, look at its consistency, look at the resilience, look at the strength and the power. It starts beating within a few weeks of gestation. And if everything goes well, it's going to beat for 3 billion times in your lifetime. It never stops. It never gives up. It's there for you all the time, full time, selflessly, relentlessly, and quietly. You're probably thinking that standing here on the TEDx stage is some self-acclaimed heart surgeon who's right prominent, who's going to tell you about some great breakthrough in surgery or some great breakthrough in medicine. But I can tell you that's not the case today. The truth is that I am a heart surgeon. I have operated on thousands of hearts. I'm also a scientist. I'm a professor. I've had the privilege of shaping our current therapies for heart failure, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and obesity. But quite frankly, when I reflect, those have not been the most meaningful breakthroughs in my life. The deepest lessons of breakthroughs have actually come from things that are quite different. They've come from patients. They've come from trainees. They've come from failure. They've come from serendipity. They've come from loss. But they've come from the heart itself. Because after having done this for many decades, what I have learned as a heart surgeon is something quite profound, and that is that a breakthrough is seldom an act of singular brilliance of one person. A breakthrough is seldom an act of a singular moment in time. A breakthrough is a result of interdependence. Interdependence of cells that trust each other, interdependence of organs that trust each other, interdependence of systems that rely on each other, and interdependence of people who refuse to stand alone. Ladies and gentlemen, interdependence is my central theme today. So let's get started with the first breakthrough, the breakthrough through the human spirit. It was 2 a.m., it was snowing, and my pager went off. Yes, we still carry pagers. Northern Ontario emerged doc on the line. His voice was tense. He said, "Dr. Verma, I need you to wake up." I said, "I just fell asleep." "I need you to look at this scan. I need your help urgently." Now, you don't look at CT scans all the time, but you can clearly see there's something going right through the heart, right here. I looked at this, and for a moment I thought this was something impossible. A 54-year-old man, in a moment of intense despair, had taken a large crossbow, precisely and deliberately placed it in an act of trying to take his own life. I looked at this and I said, this is impossible. The arrow went through and through the chest and through the heart. Here, out of here, through the diaphragm. And this is what it looked like when we actually saw the patient. You can see the large orange crossbow positioned precisely to enter the chest and exit the chest, penetrating the heart in an act of suicide. And somehow, the heart was still beating. I remember staring at this image and thinking, this cannot be survivable. Not here, not at this distance, not under these conditions, not with this injury. As they say, despair is the loneliest place where a man can be. And yet, there it was, a heartbeat refusing to stop despite being penetrated by a large crossbow used to hunt large animals. I just couldn't believe it, even as a heart surgeon. So we tried. We airlifted him. Teams moved, emergency doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, pharmacists, perfusionists, anesthesiologists, surgeons, technicians, many people who don't get a chance to stand on this stage today, but who save lives every day. We operated on him. He survived. He woke up. And years later, 2 weeks ago when I interviewed him, he's alive and grateful, and this is what he had to say.
You have given me extended, precious life, which I am using to improve my physical and mental health. I am really doing myself proud, and you all should be proud too. Proud of who you are and proud of what you do. I do not smoke, drink, or do drugs. My new addiction is self-improvement by staying clean and sober with a steady routine of weight training and exercise. Thank you very, very much to Dr. Verma and all of the wonderful help at St. Michael's Hospital. Please accept my imaginary personal hug of gratitude, appreciation, and admiration. And oh yes, keep up the great work. Thanks, guys. You mean the world to me, you know that.
And then there was another man, far from the hospital, on a quiet lake, canoeing, portaging between lakes, deep in the wilderness, no cell phone, no roads, just water, just silence. And then without warning, he collapsed. One moment he was there, the next he was in the water, drowned, lost consciousness. By the time they pulled him out of the water, he was pulseless, he was cold, he was presumed dead. But people acted. Someone started CPR, someone saw, someone moved, someone refused to accept the ending. He was airlifted, he was rewarmed, his heart restarted, his brain was okay. I operated on that patient, and he is here with us in the audience today, from drowning in a lake alone to being here today. Give him a hand. So, of course, you would say, Dr. Verma, that's great. These are breakthroughs in modern medicine. These are breakthroughs in surgery. These are breakthroughs in systems. And I would say absolutely right. But these are also breakthroughs in something much more deeper. And they teach us that even at the edge of despair, the human spirit is not always over. Sometimes the breakthrough is survival. Sometimes the breakthrough is giving someone else a second chance. Sometimes the breakthrough is discovering that a life that you thought had closed can still open up again. That's amazing. Friends, the greatest breakthroughs are acts of interdependence. They happen when people come together not to create something extraordinary, but to create a moment that none of us can do alone. No one saves a patient by themselves. Not the surgeon, not the doctor, not the perfusionist, not the anesthesiologist, not the nurse, not the person on the shore. These are moments in which we rely on each other, where interdependence brings us together and actually asks us to not abandon another human being. Well, let's talk about breakthroughs through serendipity. It turns out that some of the greatest breakthroughs in medicine did not begin where we thought they would. They began with one question, and they answered a completely different one. For years, drugs were developed for diabetes, and I see leaders in the field in the audience who have actually led that path. Suddenly, those trials started showing that these drugs had benefits in heart failure. They were reducing cardiovascular events. They were changing lives far beyond the original question. We began studying drugs for diabetes, and they suddenly became major advances for heart failure, the first advance for heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, and have improved death and disability for millions of people throughout the world. And then came the GLP-1 story Ozempic, Mounjaro, and others developed as diabetes drugs that have transformed the landscape of obesity, kidney disease, liver disease, and in fact, the entire trajectory of chronic illness today. I've had the privilege of not only being part of this story, but actually leading parts of this story. I've had the privilege of asking these questions, designing the trials, looking at the signals, and really understanding how to move this from observation to evidence to practice. But on reflection, it's not the scale of that impact that has been the biggest breakthrough. It has been how that breakthrough occurred. It occurred serendipitously. We weren't looking for it. The progress was not linear. It wasn't planned. It occurred because of collaboration. It occurred because of interdependence, interdependence of specialties, interdependence of cells, interdependence of organs, interdependence of science. Science requires humility. Science requires curiosity, and science requires interdependence. Science that we test, science that we challenge, and science that helps people move in the right direction, sometimes serendipitously. Now let's talk about breakthroughs through mentorship. This is very special to me. Can you imagine teaching heart surgery? It's hard. It's very hard. The heart is beating. The vessels are small. The margin of error is unforgiving. The stakes are enormous, but yet we have to teach the skill. But it turns out that that's not the hardest part. The hardest part has been standing beside another human being at the precise moment when they no longer believe in themselves. Over the years, fortunately or unfortunately, my office has had many of these conversations. A medical student in my office quietly saying, "Dr. Verma, I'm done." A young surgeon who had lost confidence and was already planning a way out, a trainee, a resident, exhausted, ashamed, belittled, overwhelmed, and convinced that everyone else was stronger, smarter, and more deserving. A medical student in her final year, in despair, struggling to see a future that she had worked so hard for. And in those moments, there is no textbook, there is no protocol, there are no right words. These are not ordinary moments. These are moments at the edge, moments when a person has nothing left, moments where you feel that mentorship is no longer about some technique. It is simply about presence. It is recognizing that a human being in front of you is one step closer to giving up than anyone else realizes, and then making a decision to stay, to sit with them in the darkness until they can see the light, to remind them of who they are, to value them and not judge them, to usher in hope. And slowly something changes. They see more clarity, a little strength, a reason to come back tomorrow. And they do come back. Not because the road became easier, not because fear disappeared, and not because they suddenly became perfect, but because at a critical moment in time, someone refused to let their worst day be the rest of their life. Now, I get choked up talking about this because some of those people are here today. Some are now leaders. Some are training the next generation of heart surgeons as program directors. Some are leading robotic heart surgery at leading institutions in the United States. Some are leading cardiologists, and some are leading family physicians, people who were rescued through real mentorship, one step away from giving up. And what that has taught me, ladies and gentlemen, is that one of the deepest truths of my life has not just been repairing hearts in the operating room, but it was rebuilding the hearts of people, students in despair at the edge. It's been one of the most fulfilling moments of my life. It's not standing above people, but standing beside people at a moment when they are closest to falling. As they say, you rise by lifting others. The students here will recognize that because it's a poster in my office for the last 2 decades. At a time when everyone is talking about artificial intelligence, this matters even more because mentorship, judgment, moral courage, and the belief in a human being is an entirely human act. It's an act that cannot be replaced by artificial intelligence. So as I close, ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk to you about something that feels really urgent today. Because after having opened thousands of chests and repairing thousands of hearts and seen the heart in not only its power and resilience, but also in its vulnerability, what I have learned is that no matter what your skin color is, the heart looks exactly the same. Whatever your skin color, whatever your religion, whatever your ethnicity, whatever your language or your background, your sexual orientation, or whatever the labels are that the world has placed upon you, when you open the chest, the heart does not care. It doesn't recognize your status, your race, or your belief. It has the same color, the same texture, the same fragility, the same resilience, and the same astonishing will to keep beating. And as a heart surgeon, I find that deeply moving because today we live in a time of division, at a time where people are sorted, reduced, categorized, feared, diminished, and taught to see one another first through difference. But the heart doesn't participate in any of our prejudices per se. The heart, for me, is a radical teacher of equity. And it has taught me that beneath status and tribe and ideology and identity and skin color and religion, there is a shared vulnerability that binds us all, that every human heart can break and that every human heart can fail, but that every human heart can heal and that every human heart deserves care. Regrettably, however, not every human heart has access to care throughout the world. So if a heart surgeon like myself, having stood over thousands of chests, can tell you that the deepest truth is that we all look the same inside, then we need to ask ourselves an important question, maybe a moral one. Is a person a category before they're a human being? Is dignity more important than difference? Maybe the biggest breakthrough, colleagues, is recognizing that finally, inside, we're all the same. Well, finally, let me tell you a personal story about breakthroughs. I wasn't sure I was going to share this with you, but I decided I would. I was 11. My sister here in the audience was 4. My dad was 39. He passed away in a train derailment in India. I'm 56 today, so you can do the math, many, many years back. My mother was 36. She didn't have a job. Suddenly, life changed. A widow in India with 2 kids in those days, it was tough. It was very tough. The world wasn't always kind. But what I watched was something totally extraordinary. She refused to surrender. She raised us with discipline, integrity, sacrifice, and courage. Things that I only realized many years later. She carried grief. She carried uncertainty. She carried prejudice. She carried the weight of 2 children's future, but she carried also the weight of being completely underestimated. But she kept going. And looking back, I realized that one of the first breakthroughs I ever witnessed did not happen in the operating room or in the New England Journal of Medicine or in a lecture hall or a laboratory. It happened in my own home. It was the breakthrough of resilience, the breakthrough of quiet courage, the breakthrough of a human being, a mother who decided that adversity would not define the chapter of her children's lives. So after operating on over 6,000 hearts, and who's counting, I wish I could tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that the greatest breakthroughs were technical or scientific. They weren't. They came from patients who showed me resilience. They came from discoveries that arose serendipitously. They came from trainees who found their way back home from despair. They came from the moral clarity of equity that the heart has taught me, and they came from a mother's courage who really taught me what resilience is all about. So perhaps the final lesson is that a breakthrough is not merely one moment of brilliance. It's an act of endurance. It's an act of courage. It's an act of curiosity. But above everything, it is an act of interdependence. Interdependence of systems, interdependence of people, interdependence of biology, interdependence of spirit, interdependence of lifting one another, interdependence of seeing yourself in another person, and the interdependence of refusing to let someone disappear. So, let me end where I began, with the heart beating, steady, uncelebrated, magnificent, asking for no applause, giving no speeches, simply giving itself to the work of sustaining life, reminding us with every single heartbeat that the deepest truth of life is not independence, it is interdependence. Ubuntu. I am because you are. You are because I am. And for a person who started pumping gas at a gas station to touching human hearts, that must be a breakthrough. A breakthrough because Canada opened its doors. A breakthrough because people like Bonneau and Leader and Zinman and others opened the doors. That's a breakthrough for which I'm immensely grateful to this country. We are only human through our humanity. Thank you.